Although small, the ship that would eventually become SMS Falke had a rather interesting and convoluted start to life. The American Civil War dominated much of the press in the early 1860s, offset only by the growing ironclad arms race amongst European navies, which was also in some ways linked to the conflict. While the majority of the British public were in favour of the Union side of the issue, a minority had Confederate sympathies and still others simply saw that there was money to be made. A Scottish shipyard was one of the latter. Having seen how the Confederates were willing to pay a rather premium price for ships, they started work on a 1,000-ton steamship that was designed for high speed, with a low profile, extensive machinery, and pretty much everything of significance above the decks arranged as much as possible to be in line with each other to minimize air resistance and drag. With a mere 8.5-foot draft, the vessel would make an almost perfect blockade runner, as she was slightly faster than most US Navy ships on blockade duty, and with her shallow draft she'd be able to clear sandbars and shallows that most serious warships simply couldn't, and she had enough coal aboard to sustain a prolonged high-speed run to and from a port. There was only one problem with this idea, which was that, apart from being a speculative build, i.e. there wasn't any actual order in place, the builders just hoped it would be considered attractive enough for somebody to buy it, she was also laid down in 1865, at a time when the American Civil War was, shall we say, not going especially well for the Confederate States, and indeed, by summer of that year, the war was over. With a rather dramatic drop in the demand for blockade runners, the ship was then sold to a Dutchman, who took her over to Rotterdam and named her the Heinrich Heister. Thinking possibly that her shallow draft might be handy in Dutch waters, she seems to have, however, spent the rest of the 1860s just gently bobbing at anchor. But then the Franco-Prussian War broke out, and the Prussians, realizing that they had maybe a squadron's worth of ships, and the Marine Nationale had considerably more, decided to buy up pretty much anything that floated and was reasonably fast. While perusing UK shipyards, one of the Prussian naval officers assigned to this duty heard of the small, fast blockade runner that was now in the Netherlands, and he decided that she'd make an excellent torpedo ship, using the towed variety of this weapon, as her speed and stealth might just allow her to sneak up on a French ironclad at night. Pretending to be British, the agent, Corvetten Capitaine Valdessy, the equivalent rank being Lieutenant Commander in English, purchased the ship, ostensibly set out for London, and then, partway through, ordered the crew to change course and sailed instead to Emden. From here, she was moved to the new naval base of Wilhelmshaven, renamed to Falke, or Falcon, and armed with a pair of 4.7-inch deck guns. No word if any kind of torpedo was installed, although it does seem likely. And she sailed in October 1870 for a mission against the French blockade. Unfortunately, this mission ended almost immediately when the ironclad Arminius, which was assigned to the same mission, accidentally rammed her and sent her limping back into port, almost sinking along the way. With only one dry dock completed in Wilhelmshaven at this point, Falke would just have to wait her turn, and so she wasn't repaired until 1871, and was then moved into reserves as, by this point, the war was over. But in 1875, the German Navy needed small patrol craft, variously dubbed sloops, corvettes, and various other titles across various navies, but in this case she was labelled an aviso, a term that originally meant messenger boat, but was now just one of the grab bag of terms for small warships not meant for the line of battle but still held to be quite useful. And so she spent the rest of the decade usually being commissioned for the summer training cruises of the fleet and then placed back into reserve, although her engines did keep breaking down, which didn't help matters, especially when she was sent to the Mediterranean. Most likely there was some underlying damage from the ram that hadn't been diagnosed in the dry dock. She was also used in various experiments, including to test electrification of ships for the German fleet. Occasionally called upon as a transport for various officers and civilians in various unfortunate circumstances, usually surrounding the sinking of a ship, she spent the 1880s being brought into summer commission less and less frequently, and more of these brief periods of activity were not operating with the main fleet, but rather second-line duties such as fishery patrol or acting as a general training vessel. After spending all of 1889 and most of 1890 in reserve, she was removed from the fleet roster at the end of 1890 and then sold for breaking up a couple of years later.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.